Hi, Shell.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hello?
Hi.
Wait a minute here. Try again?
Yep, I hear you.
Yeah, okay, good. All right. I wasn't hearing you and I thought
Oh,
I turned everything on. How are
okay.
you?
I'm fine. Good.
Good. Just calling up different texts.
Hey, Rabbi.
Hi, Carol. How are you?
Good.
Hi, hi,
Whatever.
I'll up the texts in a moment, but in the meantime, we can enjoy see each other.
right.
How is everyone in Israel, Carol?
Okay. I mean, I didn't see anything yet about, I got up too late, about the hostages. So that happened already today.
Yes. The
Yeah.
Oh,
hospital.
they,
The
they,
hostages are back. They're in the hospital. They've been reunited with their families, and they seem to be in decent shape. At least they have to go through the full battery of tests. So,
how many were released today?
two, and we're hoping the Israeli, who's also an American citizen, will be released tomorrow.
Only
Oh,
two?
yeah, I thought it was, I heard eight,
Yeah,
too.
I thought it was
Well, I
originally
think there are
eight.
going to be more people released on Shabbat. They
Oh.
also released some terrorists today.
Uh,
It's a hot.
oh, my Nancy's cousin, Nechama's husband, and Nechama were here, and they send their regards to you, Rabbi. You
Oh,
know,
thank you. Oh, Nechama and Rod.
yeah, Rod.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
from Brandeis. Yeah.
Yes, uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, and they came in on Tuesday night, and now they're in
Oh,
Israel. No,
oh,
they slept over at our house, and then the next morning we took them to the
the
airport.
airport. Oh, yeah. God, I would have loved to have seen them.
Yeah,
You know,
they're
uh,
gonna, yeah, they're there for a month now.
wow, that's wonderful. Well, I get to see
Yeah,
her
Shaul.
brother. Oh,
Yeah, this Shabbat they're gonna see him.
nice, nice. Hi, Rabbi Zucker. How are you?
Good. So here I am, Tovim.
So I'm Tovim. Yeah. So, Shell was just telling me about some of Nancy's cousins. It turns out one of Nancy's cousins, or one family, is their father was a conservative rabbi. Their son was my teacher. First of all, he was my madrich. He was my counselor when I was in seminar in Raman, in Israel with Ramah. And then he was my teacher when I was studying there in 78, 79. You may have heard of Joshua Stamfer, is a modern Jewish historian,
Yeah.
Hebrew U. And his sister Nechama and her now husband, Rabbi Rod Glogauer. We were all at Brandeis. I'm Nechama, I think, was a senior when I was a freshman, but Rod was already a graduate student. So we all go way back.
Very good.
Yeah. So that it's always fun to hear about them. Hi, Ricky.
Hello.
So since most of us are here, let me share my screen. No, you do not need my. Yes. Okay, there we go. Um, that's not the one I wanted to make large at the moment, but there we go. And where is the sizing? Okay, that should be better now. I think everyone can see that much more clearly. So, we're up to Parashat Bo, uh, continuing the stories of the plagues. and we'll see there is a connection between that and the Haftarah. The Haftarah is another series, like the one we saw last week, another series of prophecies against Egypt, which of course fits in with the overall notion of the plagues that are being brought against Egypt. And this time it's not from Sefer Yechezkel, but from Yirmiyahu, who is the other prophet who lived at the time of the destruction of the temple. Yirmiyahu, unlike Yechezkel, stayed in Israel after the first exile, when Yechezkel and King Tzidkiyahu and a lot of the leadership were exiled to Babylonia. Yirmiyahu remained in Israel. He eventually would leave. He and his scribe Baruch would go down to Egypt after the destruction of the temple. But he and
Will,
pardon me?
against his will.
Yes, he was not happy to go. And also, you remember from a later Haftorah that we'll probably look at. He was in prison. That's a whole nother story. While he was in prison, he made an arrangement to redeem land. It didn't seem this is during the Babylonian siege, did not seem like a good time to invest in real estate, but he did. So wait a moment, I just got some news from Israel. Oh, no, it's a great thing that Hamas is really on top of things. They finally admitted that Mohammed Deif is dead. Okay, we already knew that, and we're still not shedding any tears. Anyway, back to ancient Israel, and so Yirmiyahu is one of the eyewitnesses to what happened in Yerushalayim. He has a lot to say about the politics of the day. Just to give us a little bit of an historical picture, just a little bit of an historical. I mean, this is very, very broad because but just so we get some idea about the relationships between, even though, this is a prophecy against Egypt. And so we have to know a little bit about the relationship between Egypt and Israel. Who would like to read?
I'll read, Rabbi.
Thanks, Ricky.
By the time of the divided monarchy, the historical picture comes into better focus. Relations between Egypt, Israel, and Judah were quite variable. Although Egypt's new kingdom empire in the Levant had ended, the region continued to be a useful trading outlet, and the pharaohs were not above waiting to assert their power. However, there are numerous examples of fugitives in the Levant finding refuge from their enemies in Egypt. In the interest of maintaining a buffer zone against the northern empires that encroached, Egypt and Cush gave military aid to Israel and Judah at times through both direct action and supplies.
Yeah, we have to, when we think of the overall map of the Middle East, we have to remember that there's going to be conflict between the great civilizations of Mesopotamia, Assyria, Babylonia, later Persia, and Egypt. And who gets caught in the middle? And of course, the same thing happens in the days of the Hasmoneans. You have the breakup of Alexander the Great's empire, and you have the Ptolemies in Egypt and the Seleucids in Syria, and they're constantly in conflict. And who's caught between Syria and Egypt? But Israel. Yeah, and of course, for the Seleucids, when you have to pay for an army, including mercenaries, it's expensive. So it's much easier to use somebody else's money, i.e., the money in the temple in Jerusalem. So that was
Along with other temples that they raided.
yeah, right, yeah. So
It was their regular policy.
yeah, so
Temples functioned as banks in those days. You have to basically understand that this isn't something that's an anti-religious act. It's simply Willie Sutton would say, why do I rob banks? Because that's where the money is.
Right.
So that's you have to understand what this is about. It's not an act against religion.
No. I mean, it was
just like you said, that's where the money is.
Yeah. And what we understand why Jesus gets upset at the moneylenders in the temple. I mean,
Money
people,
changers, not money lenders.
yeah, sorry, money changers,
Yeah.
because people
Which
were
is
coming
Maser
from.
Sheni by nature. Basically, the whole Maser Sheni enterprise essentially says you have to basically change when you get to Jerusalem what you brought into something you could sacrifice. In other words, Sefer Devarim makes it perfectly clear that without such a group of people being available to do something like that, the whole Maser Sheni system can't possibly work. You know?
So basically, yeah. So basically, what I'm going to explain is that people were coming from all over. Those who made pilgrimage to the temple, and they had first, and also you have to realize that it's not just money; it's animals. Both animals that were sacrificed, and some people could bring the animals, but the Israelites who lived further away from the temple, they couldn't necessarily schlep their animals, so they bought the animals when they were in Yerushalayim, and the same thing, they had to bring in, and some people brought their animals and sold them probably, so they, that Maser Sheni, so that there had to be a lot of monetary affairs taking place in the temple. That was just how it worked. It wasn't necessarily corruption. Now, as we get to the period of the Romans, and the Romans are in control of Judea, and they were appointing the high priests, we can imagine that it wasn't the most uh, honest of systems, but that, and probably true for other temples. And why did they rob temples? Because those were where people had money. So you've got, but get a sense of the with Egypt and Cush giving military aid to Israel and Judah at times. It's because Israel serves as the buffer zone from the northern empires. Go on, Ricky.
The prophets, the prophets had not forgotten Egypt's role as an oppressor and frequently condemned it, as well as the tendency of Israelite and Judahite rulers to seek its help. But at times the prophets also envisioned peace with Egypt.
Yeah, so there were different attitudes toward Egypt, and as we know, the prophets were not happy when the Israelites were turning to Egypt because, as Yechezkel pointed out, they were a reed as opposed to a strong stick. They'll just bend, they'll be of no use and even destructive. And Yirmiyahu feels the same way. He really did not like Yehoiachin, who was the king, for a good period of the time that he was working. Go on.
There are a number of specific Egyptian texts that supply mutually illuminating points of comparison with biblical texts, including wisdom instructions, prayers, hymns, creation accounts, and autobiographies. These are indications of the extensive ongoing cultural interactions between Egypt and the cultures that produced the Old Testament.
Yeah. So, as we know, Israel is a part of the entire ancient Near East. And so many elements of ancient Near Eastern culture had great influence on Israel. We'll be coming up to our the first collection of laws, the Covenant Code, Sefer Abrit, later on in Sefer Shmot, and we know that many of those laws, there's like 1,000 years of legal tradition in the ancient Near East that the Israelites drew on. Didn't mean they repeated it verbatim, but they certainly the similarities are very, very clear. And as well, and so many other things. One of the things that scholars have noticed and appropriate for today, Chodesh Tov, by the way, the Psalm for Rosh Chodesh is very similar to the Psalm to the Aten, Akhenaten's hymn, to the sun disk. And in fact, in Philip Glass's opera on Akhenaten, he has Akhenaten singing the hymn, but he also has the chorus singing Psalm 104. So, you know, there are clearly a lot of influences and, you know, wisdom literature, talk about the love literature and Shir HaShirim, but it's not just Egyptian texts that give us some insight into what's going on. So, well, actually, let's just jump to, let me get there. Oh, yes, here it is. The beginning of our let's see. Let me get to the beginning of our chapter. Our Haftarah begins later on in the chapter, but it's worthwhile looking at the beginning of the chapter to kind of get the context. So, Rick, you want to go on chapter 46?
The word of the Lord to the prophet Yirmiyahu concerning the nations. Concerning Egypt, about the army of Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, which was at the river Euphrates near Carchemish,
Mm-hmm.
and which was defeated by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon in the 4th year of King Joachim, son of Hosea of Judah.
Yeah, so, you know, there are things going on, not just what's happening in Israel, but there are events that are affecting.
Well, keep in mind, Rabbi Papa, the introduction at the beginning of chapter 46 is clearly dating it in the year 605. More prophecies are dated to that year than any other year in the entire book of Yirmiyahu. Doesn't mean that what's going on in chapter 13 in verse 13 should be dated to the same year. It's quite possible that verse 13 reflects the situation after Chafra became the ruler of Egypt in 589. And in other words, they're putting them all together because this is a collection of
Yeah, we're going to take a look at that in a moment.
Oracles against the nations.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at that in a moment.
That doesn't mean they come from the same time, you know.
Right. No, we'll talk about that in a moment.
Because after all, is Yirmiyahu entering Melech Bavel HaKot at Darat Mitzrayim in 605? The battle of 605 was at Carchemish, you know, on the other end of the world, so to speak. You know, yes, you could think Yirmiyahu might arrive there eventually. It turns out by 604, he's in Ashkelon, but it doesn't change the fact that he never successfully invaded Egypt at any point, you know?
Right.
So Bravo probably means in anticipation of a possibility.
Right.
In verse 13, the first verse, in other words, you can't go from verse 1 to verse 13 and assume that they're the same time. They may not be.
No, absolutely not. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I just wanted to see the overall context. You know, the reality is, as we have it in the Masoretic text, these prophecies are combined. They were not necessarily. We'll see.
Conflated.
Pardon me?
It's been conflated.
Yes, they, you know, so that you know, they may not. And we've talked about this. This is true of the prophetic books, that the prophets delivered their oracles, they delivered their messages, and they may not have delivered it in the same order as these prophecies appear in their books.
Well, the introductory line of chapter 46 just simply says that we're giving you a set of prophecies that basically were oracles against the nations. And then it says Lim Mitzrayim. Starting chapter 48 says Lim Moav. In 49, Lim Amon. So, you know, this is an editor's work, okay? Or a student of Yirmiyahu's, you know. This is how it was arranged, but that does not mean in any way that we should look upon these as contemporary documents.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. And might as well go back to this now since you brought it up. I just trying to take it a step at a time. You know, we have this opening verse, but it's correct. It's just an introduction. It's not necessarily. Does somebody have something on in the background?
Me.
Yeah, because I'm hearing. So I mean, it could just be the system. I don't know. But Ricky, go on here with the comment. of
John Bright.
John Bright, and we'll see Fishbane as well, that talk about the fact that this is the beginning of a section, and this opening verse is just like a superscription, is not necessarily connected to each and every prophecy that appears. Go ahead.
John Bright, chapters whatever, which consist entirely
46 to 51.
consist entirely of sayings directed at foreign nations, form a distinct unit in the Yahoo book, the superscription of which is found in 46,
6-1.
and Michael Fishbane, Yahoo
Wait,
46.
wait 1 second, please. I'm trying to see if somebody else is trying to get in here.
I think there's something with Carol's phone. Maybe if she mutes.
I don't think,
Right, yeah, but there's nothing, I don't hear
I
it.
don't think it's Carol.
No, I don't know. It keeps coming up green on my screen.
Okay, I'll mute.
All right, whatever. Okay. So anyway, go on. And Michael Fishbane.
Yirmiyahu 46:13 to 28, our Haftorah, is part of a series of prophecies against Egypt and constitute the first group of pronouncements against foreign nations collected in Yirmiyahu 46 to 51. This anthology is entitled The Word of Hashem to the Prophet Yirmiyahu Concerning the Nations, Yirmiyahu 46:1.
Yeah, the opening of this chapter is just an overall title. Go on.
As a distinct
That should be thematic.
unit, these oracles stand apart from the prophecies against Israel in Yirmiyahu 1 to 25. The constellations in Yirmiyahu 30 to 32 and the historical narratives found in Yirmiyahu 26 to 29 and 33 to 45.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the prophecies that we see in the different prophetic books are not necessarily organized in chronological order. They may be grouped, as we see here, and in Yechezkel and other prophets, they may often form specific units, but we know that they're not necessarily organized chronologically, and there's definitely a lot of if you will, editing that goes on, and certainly in the book of Yirmiyahu. I've not studied Yirmiyahu in enough detail to know all of the different theories about the different parts of the book. To some extent, I'm more interested in Yirmiyahu as our prophet in its complete form. But it's clear there were different sections, and even within the book, Yirmiyahu at a certain point writes things down. And it's very likely that Yirmiyahu was his own first editor, or his scribe Baruch. So, and we saw that in Yechezkel, we saw the first of them, but each of them have a collection of oracles against the nations. Did they come directly from the prophets themselves or from their schools? I don't know. But certainly they are part of Yechezkel, Yirmiyahu. I mean, there are oracles against other nations. I mean, remember we studied Ovadia, and Ovadia was against Moab.
Edom.
Edom. Why did I say Moab?
Edom.
I meant Edom. Yeah, it was totally against Edom. So, okay. Now, not only are there Egyptian materials, but in terms of the era that we're talking about, and again, it's not necessarily we have a good idea of when these prophecies were given, not necessarily the precise dates, because as Yehudi pointed out, the battle between Egypt and Babylonia is taking place in Carthage. It's not necessarily near Israel. Okay. Somebody like to go on here?
I
Right.
can
These
go.
Babylonian Chronicles.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
These Babylonian chronicles provide most of the information we have on historical and military events in the Neo and late Babylonian periods because we lack royal annals from Babylonia, such as we have among Neo-Assyrian sources. We have 15 tablets or fragments of Babylonian chronicles, which are conventionally divided into the Neo-Babylonian Chronicle series 1 through 7, and the late Babylonian Chronicle series 8 through 13a. The first group is presented here in translation.
Yeah, I just brought this in to get a sense of, you know, there are a lot of things in the Bible for which we have no extra biblical evidence. You know, it's in the Bible and it appears nowhere else. But one of the great things about the opening up of the ancient Near Eastern materials, all of the discoveries and archaeological work that was done, is we found a lot of their literature, and they often shed light on the biblical texts. So this is just a little bit of background. You know, if you were to read a newspaper of the day as opposed to just reading, I don't know if there were a more general newspaper than say the Judean Times that would, would have Yirmiyahu and his particular perspective. Go on.
The 21st year, the king of Akkad remained in his land. Nebuchadnezzar, his eldest son, the prince of the crown prince's palace, called up the armed forces of Akkad. He took his army's lead and went to the city of Carchemish, which is on the bank of the Euphrates. He crossed the river against the army of Egypt, which was encamped at Carchemish. They struck each other, and the army of Egypt took flight before him, and he inflicted a defeat upon him. He finished them off until none were left. As for the remnant of the army of Egypt, which had escaped the defeat without serious injury, the army of Akkad conquered them in the province of the land of Hamato.
Yeah, that's probably somewhere in the area of Eretz Yisrael.
They inflicted such a defeat upon them that no man returned to his land. At that time, Nebuchadnezzar conquered Hamato completely. For 21 years, Nabopolassar exercised the kingship of Babylon.
That's Nebuchadnezzar's father.
Okay. On the 8th day of the month of Ab, he died. In the month of Elul, Nebuchadnezzar returned to Babylon, and on the first day of the month of Elul, he ascended the royal throne in Babylon.
So we just get a sense of what's going on there. And as he pointed out, and as we talked about from Yechezkel's prophecy, Babylonia didn't conquer Egypt. And Carchemish is, if it's far from Israel, it's far from Egypt. So, that this is their view of what was going on. Okay, so let's go back. Let's finally get to our Haftarah.
The word that Hashem spoke to the prophet Jeremiah about the coming of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon to attack the land of Egypt.
So all of this is going on. How involved or how knowledgeable Yirmiyahu was about the whole situation, and people knew about it. One, because the armies were marching through Israel. And there would be consequences when Egypt would rebel against Babylonia, and the Israelites would join them, and then Israel, of course, Judah was conquered by Babylonia, and Egypt was nowhere to be found to help them. Okay, go on. Sorry.
Declare, proclaim in Migdol, proclaim in Nof, and Tahpanhes. Tahpanhes.
Say Thebes in English. That's probably what that is. We
What-
know about Memphis and Thebes. Those terms are
Yeah.
familiar to everybody. We have places in America named after those places.
Right.
That's how the King James translates Nof and Tachpanches.
Yeah.
Okay. So, instead of getting stuck on these hard to pronounce Hebrew words, try to basically think of Memphis and Thebes and you got it.
And
Okay.
Migdol is the northern entrance to Egypt.
Right.
Right.
It's the Fort Ticonderoga of Egypt.
Yeah. Wait, one moment.
Hey, Migdol, but yeah, next week's Parsha.
Yeah, exactly. Let me add something else here. There we go.
Oh, yay. I was going to ask for that, and you read my mind.
Yeah.
Nothing
so,
better than a map.
Yeah. So we have, of course, this is already, we're in Egypt. As you can see, Rafah and Gaza. But
Where are they showing Migdol, though?
I don't know that they don't necessarily use.
They don't show it. Okay.
I think Migdol is Pelusium, Rabbi Zatar.
It's not Pelusium, but it's close.
That's what I
You
meant. It's
see
like
where
the and
where the
Mosul.
14
they're
is?
not the
Yeah,
same
here's
site, but they're
can everyone see this?
Each other.
Here, this
All
is
right.
basically
Give you a
the
little
Nile
background.
Delta.
1973, I discovered a fortress while survey work for Eliezer Oren. And after the war, he did a sounding and he found evidence to indicate that there was a sherd with an inscription that was Migdol.
So,
right about where the 14 is on that map.
14 on the map.
14.
It was a little bit west and southwest
I see.
of Pelusium.
you see where? Can
Yeah,
you see where
exactly.
my cursor
See the
is?
14?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Very good, Rabbi Zatar.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
That was terrific.
And this is, of course, the Nile Delta.
And that, by the way, one thing, that was where the road across the northern Sinai came to Egypt proper.
Cool.
Where's the Suez Canal on this?
Not there.
Yeah, go ahead.
No.
It goes from the Gulf of Suez.
Okay,
all the way
it
up.
would be a little bit to the west.
Because I crossed the Suez Canal when I went down to Egypt. It was kind of cool. We were on you go in a ferry with your cars.
Yeah, it comes across and then goes down to Great Bitter Lakes and then down to the Gulf of Suez.
Ah, okay.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, and also when we talk about the Nile Delta, which I think everyone kind of realizes, a delta is the Greek letter and it's shaped like a triangle. And what do we have here? Kind of like a triangle, because the Nile splits into various tributaries.
Yeah.
Hence the Nile Delta.
Yeah, Cairo is right at the base of the delta.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And other places that we've known about. Well, here is Memphis. And
oh, this is a big help, Rabbi Bobby.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is I forget where I found this now.
Yeah, you have it there. It's labeled. It's the place where it comes from. It's somewhere on the map. I saw it.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's zillions of maps like this. You can just pick the one you want.
Yeah. And also important to recognize, as we think about what are the biblical names and what are the names we know the places now, we have to remember that the names are actually Egyptian.
Yeah.
Like, P. Ramesses.
Right.
We know from Pithom and Ramses, but here's, what the hieroglyphics say. I don't read hieroglyphics. Never learned. So just fascinating here, the Valley of the Kings, which is where they found so many of the mummies and stuff. Here's Thebes down here. And of course, when they talk about Cush, we're talking, down here,
Nubia, right.
Nubia.
Right.
They have Kush on the lower right of Nubia there. You see that? Or at least what you're showing there.
Oh, yes, right. Sorry.
Most people
There we
think Kush
go.
is where Ethiopia is now,
Yeah.
where the Blue Nile goes.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's more correct, and I think this is probably a more general. And again, but we
That's a
talked
good
about
one.
Cush. That's and we use that quite a bit. I mean, they mention it quite a bit
It's more
in the
Sudan than the Kushite empire was in Sudan more than Ethiopia.
Okay. So back to our text. Yes. I'm slowly learning how to use visual aids on this thing.
You're many steps ahead of me.
I'll continue then.
Yeah.
Say, take your posts and stand ready, for the sword has devoured all around you. Why are your stalwarts swept away? They did not stand firm, for Hashem thrust them down. Many were made to stumble. They fell over one another. They said, Up, and let us return to our people, to the land of our birth, because of the deadly sword. There they called Pharaoh, king of Egypt, braggart who let the hour go by.
Okay, so what is Yirmiyahu saying here? What's happening?
You were full of hot air and nothing else.
Yeah, and
Well, that's
all your
verse 17,
mercenaries,
but
all
he
the
read
people.
3 verses. Oh, we got to go back to verse 15. I do understand. It was 17 says that, but 15 and 16 are saying something else.
Yeah. God has literally struck fear into the hearts of all of the mercenaries. First of all, Babylonia.
You're translating Abirecha as mercenaries?
Oh, no. Well, Abirecha, your stalwarts, they could be mercenaries. We'll come to
Some
that
say
in a
it's the
moment.
name of Apis or one of the other gods of Egypt.
Well, that's so let's take a look at first of all the Hebrew. Um, Madua nischaf abirecha.
Swept away.
Yeah, swept away. Madua nischaf abirecha. And here's what Fishbane has to say. Go on, Shell.
Swept away. Given the theme of flight in these prophecies, um, and the Egyptian setting of the oracle, it's possible that the word nish nishap was chosen
That
as a
should be nispach. I don't know.
okay.
No, nischaf. Nischaf. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was right.
was
Sorry.
was
Yeah, nischaf.
was chosen as a
Derisive.
derivative pun.
No, derisive pun, Shelley.
Derisive.
Make fun of them.
Okay.
I think I
You
sorry,
put
I
in
spelled it
yeah,
wrong.
that's better.
I apologize.
That's okay.
Typo.
Derisive pun on the Egyptian god Apis, worshipped at Memphis. This interpretation is in fact articulated in the Septuagint,
Septuagint, the Greek translation.
yeah, right, which renders the phrase, why has Apis fled, the bull not stood? The translation is based on the Mizrach etymology in which the word nishap
No,
was
nischaf.
niskaf was constructed from the verb nas, has fled, and the noun haf, apis. It also takes the plural bulls, abirekha,
Abirecha.
as a plural of majesty, bull, and links it to the next line.
Yeah, so and interestingly, John Bright in the Anchor Bible translates this verse according to the Septuagint. Why has Apis fled, the bull not stood? So kind of interesting that one. They're talking about Egypt's bull god, and we remember that one, there are all kinds of um, I'm suddenly blanking on the English here.
I was just checking to help out here. Sachap is using one other place, talking about Matar Geshem Sochef, like a flash flood, something along that nature. So that's in the Sefer Mishlei. And so actually swept away works perfectly fine. You don't really need. I
No.
was more interested in the Abirecha part because I don't think that word means mercenaries.
No. I'm just thinking, just in general, and you're talking about all your stalwarts, all your soldiers, which includes mercenaries. They're all running away. Up, let us return to our people, to the land of our birth. It may or may not be mercenaries.
Oh, that's why you thought it was mercenaries.
No,
I
no, I
see.
don't.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
don't.
understand where you were going. Now I've got it.
Yeah,
Good.
sorry. No, I don't. I wouldn't translate Abirecha as mercenaries. They translated here stalwarts, but I'm just thinking that among the soldiers would be mercenaries, and nischaf, as you mentioned, appears one other time in the Tanakh. It's not the most common word for to be swept away. So the fact that you have nischaf and abirecha, that's just and what I was going to say, that when you
Abir
think of
means
the
the most
gods,
important horseman, the person who's leading the pack. Abir Harawim Asher L'Shaul, when they introduce Doeg HaAdomi. So the word is used for human beings about 4 or 5 times. When it's used for Hashem, it's always Avir, to make a clear
right? Avir
distinction
Yaakov.
between the two of them. Okay? But Abir generally means the hot shots, in other words, not so much the commitment, but it's more the ability. Okay. Yeah. Those are people who are the best soldiers, even they're running for their lives. Okay.
Yeah, and actually in modern Hebrew, I think they often use the word avir for night.
For what?
For night, like Knights of the Round
With a
Table.
K, with a K.
With a K, K-N. Yeah,
Oh.
not Lila, but yeah.
we need subtitles.
Yeah, sorry. And so here it's just a very harsh, and especially they're punning on the guy. And I was talking about Apis, the bull god. We know that in the ancient Near East they had all kinds of composite critters, that were seen as gods. And even we talked about this with the God's chariot that Ezekiel sees. They're driven by these composite critters with the different faces and wings.
We
Leg
call
of a
them
calf.
hybrid creatures.
Pardon me?
We call them hybrid creatures
Hybrid,
at the time.
sorry, not composite, hybrid, yeah. A hybrid. So, and of course, the importance of the bull can't be missed because, we do call God Avir Yaakov. And we have, what did they make in the wilderness? A golden calf.
And of course, Jeroboam's.
Right. So, not a big shock. I mean, especially if we were enslaved in Egypt, then we would be influenced by the culture.
Or are you making
And
a
for
bit
what
of a
it's
jump
worth,
to...
you have from Har Eval the discovery of a small bull figure.
Oh yeah,
from the 11th century BCE.
The is the bull figure. The Abir is more like a horse type setup. It's not. I mean, don't get me wrong. But we don't hear too much about horse worship.
No.
So I'm not so sure we should jump from Abir in verse 15 to Eglah in verse 20.
Oh no,
they're talking about worshiping foreign gods. 20 perhaps. Okay, 15. It would work perfectly well as top horseman.
Yeah, no, I think that is
probably
clearly I think you're right that is definitely the shot. The question is, how far are they going with the puns? And I think that that is, as you said, much more so in what's coming up. So
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I shall just finish up this
Sure.
next verse.
As I live, declares the king, whose name is Hashem of hosts, as surely as Tabor is among the mountains and Carmel is by the sea, so shall this come to pass. Equip yourself for exile, fair Egypt, you who dwell secure, or Noph shall become a waste, desolate, without inhabitants.
Yeah, so like, fair Egypt, this great mighty kingdom, you're going into exile. You're going to be defeated. Didn't really happen, but um and Tabor, of course, is Har Tabor in
And
Israel.
remember what I asked you that time, what's special about Hatavar, and you came up with the answer in 2 seconds. Hatavar sticks out in the middle of nowhere. It's like
That's
Mount
true. Yeah,
Rainier
it's
near
like
Seattle. And
yeah.
so that makes it very prominent, not its height, but the fact that in the middle of an AMAC, Hatavar just sticks out like a finger.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in other words, when he's making a reference to it, and Carmel too, where is there a place along the southeast Mediterranean where you have a mountain going smack up against the water? That's the only place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now, so that's, I had that under one, because now we come to a second a prophecy of Yirmiyahu. Again, they may or may not have been delivered or at the same time, certainly around the same time, most likely, but who wants to continue? Anyone volunteer to read? Or Sheldon, want to keep going?
Let's
Carol, if
Carol,
you're speaking, we can't
Carol,
hear you. You're muted.
you unmute Carol.
Carol, you're muted.
You're still muted.
I have to click on the phone icon. No, we can't hear you.
Click on the microphone, Carol, and it should unmute. No?
Okay.
There you go.
There you go.
I know.
Thank you. Okay, good.
Did it help when I muted whatever noise you were hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it did help.
Yes, it
Yes.
did.
I don't know what noise because
Unless it
I
was
don't hear
somebody
it
in the
now. Don't worry.
background.
It's a
Don't worry
glitch.
about it.
Yeah,
hear it
don't
now.
worry. Nope.
All right.
Keep going.
Egypt is a handsome heifer. A gadfly from the north is coming. The mercenaries too, in her midst, are like stall-fed calves. They too shall turn tail, flee as one, and make no stand. Their day of disaster is upon them, the hour of their doom. She shall wrestle away like a snake as they come marching in force. They shall come against her with axes, like hewers of wood. They shall cut down her forest, declares Hashem, though it cannot be measured, for they are more numerous than locusts and cannot be counted. Fair Egypt shall be shamed, handed over to the people of the north.
So this is a lot like the earlier part. Here they actually say mercenaries. Maybe that's why I was confused. But the point is, these great warriors, they're just going to turn tail, as they say. They're going to run away. They know they've had it, and he's using a variety of images here. First of all, that stall-fed calves, they're just, you know, they just want to sit comfortably and eat. They're going to run away. Um, and another thing, they'll wrestle away like a snake as the Babylonians come marching away in force. They may have come out with all their pomp and circumstance, but they're just going to kind of slither away, sneak away. They're going to be so scared. And an image that we have in various places in the Bible, Babylonians will come against them with axes, like hewers of wood. It's like as if they're a forest. You know, uh, these people are coming with axes to chop them down. And then finally, this great line.
Fair Egypt.
Pardon me. Well, before that, Ki rabu me arbev in lehem mispar. They are more numerous than locusts and cannot be counted. That's very appropriate for our parasha because we read about the arbeh. in this week's parasha. We read about the locusts in
Very
this week's
good. Very
parasha.
good.
So yeah, no, so that's and I emphasized Fair Egypt, Bat Mitzrayim, um, only because we have it in the first section. Here, Fair Egypt, you dwell secure. And down here, as much as scholars like to break apart texts and say, oh, they're from different sources, there's clearly a continuity between these two prophecies. Even if they weren't delivered at the same time, they're likely delivered at the same time, and he's using a similar language. Okay, go on, Carol.
There's a nice play here. A
Oh,
couple of
yeah.
things. Number one, in verse 20, a lot of manuscripts read the second word but as not a repeat of the first one. But even Masoretic manuscripts read it as but, meaning inside her. Okay. Bet hey. Okay. Targum Yonatan reads it that way. Okay. And that really increases the sharpness of what's going up.
Yeah.
Egway Marvek means, not just stable, it means stuffed. Those cows that are stuffed for the slaughter. That's basically why, that's what Marvek basically means, so stuff. In other words, the way this is going, it's and then look at this connection between Cardom, Chotev, and Korekt. All of which mean cutting down.
Yep.
What are you going to do with Kol Like you mentioned the snake imagery. The snake is certainly, if you're going to stretch that to mean as much as crocodile, I'm not sure we should do that. Okay. But what exactly Kol here would mean? It's cries of help, help. Is that how you're going to understand it? What do you mean here when you say Kol You mentioned it, but I didn't quite get where you were going.
No, I was just saying that, whereas, I'm thinking of Egypt as marching out against the Babylonians, or to meet the Babylonians, probably with great pomp and circumstance. But then, they're so defeated that they just kind of slither away like a snake that kind of hides in the grass.
So you don't read it as hissing.
It could very well. I mean, what sound does a nachash make? But it hisses, and it hisses when it's angry, when it's hurt. That that's
NJB translates it. Hear her hissing like a snake. As they advance and force to fall upon her with their axes. No, the hissing isn't coming from attacking; it's coming from running away. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
See what's coming at them. And what do they say? The rats desert the sinking ship.
That's how I see it. As that they may have marched out feeling powerful, but they're running away. They're just Bright translates at it. Hear her hiss like a snake when in force they approach and with axes fall upon.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
He just comments on the text a little bit. Okay. So again, looking at the word heifer, egla yefefiyah, again, that's much more taking a look at, this may be more talking about the bull god. So Fishbane says this metaphor may allude to the Egyptian bull god Apis, probably mocked in verse 15. So
if you say Amon ve'al Eloheha, in other words, in verse 25, I'm sure you're already thinking of pointing out that in the Parsha Bo it says V'chol Elohim Mitzrayim as said
Shvatim. Yeah. So it's this is another connection to the parasha, and certainly this would not this would be part of the biblical writers to make fun of the pagan gods. They do it in a few places. So go on, Carol.
Hashem of hosts, the God of Israel, has said, I will inflict punishment on Ammon of No and on Pharaoh, on Egypt, her gods and her kings, on Pharaoh and all who rely on him. I will deliver them into the hands of those who seek to kill them, into the hands of King Nebuchadrezzar of Babylon, and into the hands of his subjects. But afterward she shall be inhabited again as in former days, declares Hashem.
Yeah, so she may come now. That maybe he's hedging his bets because, as we know, Egypt was not invaded by Babylonia, and did not go into exile. Defeated, but not into exile.
It's probably Yirmiyahu's under the influence here of what happened when Esarhaddon conquered Egypt in 669 and base or 679, and furthermore, Nahum already mentions Hineni Pokade Amon Reno.
Yeah.
So, given the fact that Nahum, who's writing around the year 612, is already saying that, Yirmiyahu is a contemporary of Nahum. He must know about this. And basically, he's using the language that's already out there. Remember when we were doing this influence of Sophania on Yechezkel? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, so that's probably what this is. So whether it happened or not, it's going to happen.
Yeah. And
it did happen once. So why not again?
But now we have a shift. We have two, our Torah is made up of two passages. The first passage, very much a prophecy against Egypt. The second passage, also a prophecy against Egypt. Now we come into a final section, which has actually two parts. And here we see, there's a lot of repetition here. Using the same kind of words, all those words having to do with cut down that Yehudi pointed out. I think Yirmiyahu is very deliberate in his language. And even though we were looking at the sentence above here, Egla Yefefia Mitzrayim Keretz Mitzafon Bava, and they sometimes read it as Bava Baba, within her, but certainly in the translate here, a gadfly from the north is coming. It's kind of a powerful language and fits with the using the term yefefiyah as it's kind of a repetition of itself. So, but let's take a look at the last parts. But you have no fear.
Okay. But you have no fear, my servant Jacob. Be not dismayed, O Israel. I will deliver you from far away, your folk from their land of captivity, and Jacob again shall have common quiet, with none to trouble him.
Yeah, so it's kind of a contrast. Egypt is going to fall, but in the end, you guys are going to be okay. And of course, in Lach Yerushalayim, we have the words Al tiravi al techat avdi Yaakov. Do not fear, because your enemies will be scattered. And these language very much from Tanakh. And then the second line.
But you have no fear, my servant Jacob, declares Hashem, for I am with you. I will make an end of all the nations among which I have banished you. But I will not make an end of you. I will not leave you unpunished, but I will chastise you in measure. Great.
Yeah, so, and of course, for Yirmiyahu, who sees the destruction of Jerusalem and the expulsion of the people, and has already seen the expulsion of the leadership years before, and the destruction of the northern kingdom, now it's he didn't see the destruction of the northern kingdom. That was long before him. But we do have
but he's very conscious of it because he lives in a border village that practically abuts the northern kingdom. And it's clear that at the beginning of his career, he was addressing the remnants of the northern kingdom.
Right. Yeah. So, Anatot is kind of toward the north. In fact, as Bright comments on it, in his commentary, I haven't gone through it in any type of serious way, but just glancing at a few sections, something that's known, the influence of Deuteronomy on Yirmiyahu and Hosea. There are northern influences on Yirmiyahu, and not a shock because he's from Anatot, which is up close to the north.
Anatod is to the just east of Jerusalem, northeast, but not that
northeast.
far.
Yeah,
Northeast.
Modern Anta.
Yeah, Hosea has more influence on Yirmiyahu than almost does. A
Yeah.
lot more. So it's definitely something that has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, so and then Radak brings out. We're only gonna have a chance to time to read Radak here because we're at the end. And I didn't have a chance to translate it, Barbanel. Rabbi Moshe Silverstein in his commentary on the Haftarot brings in there two commentaries, doesn't bring in the actual commentaries, but talks about how they comment on this. But it's worthwhile reading Radak here, Kimchi. But you, go ahead, Carol.
But you have no fear. This passage is for the future, and I have already explained it above in its place. It is taught here with a few changes in words, but the issue. The reason is because Scripture mentioned the punishment of the nations. It also declares towards Israel, but you have no fear, for you are not like them. Even though they will return to their land after their exile, they will have no peace and quiet. Rather, their destiny is that they will cease to be a nation and their name no longer remembered. However, Israel's name and memory will stand as long as the heavens over the earth.
Yeah. So, you know, the Israelites have suffered. And, you know, it's like, oh my God, are we going to have the same fate of everyone else? And I think Radak is correctly pointing out that the prophet is saying, no, yes, you're being punished. You're being chastised, to use the words, but only in measure. You will be restored. So, so that's our Torah, very interestingly structured, with two prophecies against Egypt, and then a concluding prophecy or prophecies about Israel, you know, that are in contrast to these oracles against the nations. And again, we get a little, you know, one of the things about Yirmiyahu is that, you know, it mentions there's the prose section. We get a lot of history in Yirmiyahu. So between the Book of Kings and Yirmiyahu and Chronicles, there's a lot more, you know, we get a lot of information. And then as well, we have extra biblical sources, you know, whether it's Egyptian sources, Babylonian sources, that give us insight into what's going on, all the politics. But of course, our prophets are reading this not just as politics, but as our relationship with God. And how do we understand that? And how does the world reflect God's involvement in the world and what's going on? Any final comments, questions?
Yeah,
Yes. So Ed, go ahead.
I forget the first part of the sentence, but I know because we were slaves in Egypt, because we lived in Egypt and they gave us a home, we're not supposed to something the Egyptians. And I forget the word, that is it hate or how we're supposed to feel towards the Egyptians where we had, you know, place to live.
I remember the comment. I don't remember the exact words, and I don't remember the exact Hebrew words.
Yeah.
That's
we're
supposed
supposed
to,
is that what you love them?
No,
you also have lo yavo admoniu mitzri b'kachal Hashem.
But they have
three, so it's mixed.
But 3 generations. No, Rabbi Zucker, that's not quite precise. But that's in the context of the fact that Ammoni and Moavi can't ever come in all together.
Right.
Then Sefer Devarim says, but Egyptians can come in the 3rd generation because they once hosted you at a time when you had the, you know, yourself. Right. So the general feeling you get out of that particular text in Devarim chapter 23 is positive towards Egypt, not negative.
Yeah, we have a couple of those in Tanakh. I don't remember them all offhand, but you know there is, you know, almost that positive view of Egypt. Which,
Right.
for much of the Bible, we wouldn't necessarily think of them as being positive, but there's the time when we came into Egypt that with Yosef, which was certainly started out positively.
And of course, you had a very large, in Second Temple period, you had a very large population, Jewish population in Egypt.
Yep.
With even the Temple of On.
Right.
Which the Talmud says that it is not to be included among those that are proscribed, forbidden.
Yeah.
And making a dedication or an offering in the temple On was not forbidden.
Okay.
Yeah. So and that line is,
what was that called? Leontopolis, Rabbi Zucker?
Leontopolis, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
that's how I was trying to get the name that I'm more familiar with. Thank you.
Here is I found the line. Thank you, Yehudi. It's in chapter 23 of Devarim, right? Lo tita'ev adomi ki achicha hu. You should not hate or reject the stronger than reject the Admoni, because the Edomite, because he is your brother. Lo tita'ev mitzri, and nor should you behave that way toward the Egyptian. Ki ger hayita ba'artso. And exactly as Yehudi said, you were a stranger in his land. Banim asher yivaldu lahem, children that are born to them, dor shlishi yavo lahem bikal Adonai. The third generation may enter into the congregation of the Lord. But of course, that whole section is, as my teacher Avram Malamat said, a very important statement about the Bible that was made by an American, not even a Bible scholar. The things you read in the Bible, they ain't necessarily so.
Thank you,
George Gershwin.
Yeah.
A Jewish fellow.
Yeah, no, it was very funny because Malamat made that comment, and he's giving all this in
that
Hebrew.
You're liable to read in the Bible, the things that you're liable to read in the Bible, and ain't necessarily
so. He looked right at us. There were three of us from JTS who were taking his class, and he delivered that line in English. He looked right at us because he knew we would get it. They ain't necessarily so. But not allowed to allow Moabite in. But then again, we've got Ruth. So, you always have those who want to.
If you accept the idea that it was composed at different times,
by different
and Deuteronomic influence, etc., this would seem to be before 605. It might have been written in the 620s or composed in the 620s, but by 605, they did not have that opinion about the Egyptians.
Yeah. So, listen to early comments about that were later disproven about the Haggadah in terms of relations with the Arameans and stuff. Whatever. There's history. There's always history going on, and it's interesting to see how that things.
Before you end, I would call your attention to a very interesting article this week in the Torah.com. Let me get her name. Angela Roskop Erisman. Moses is modeled on Horus and Sargon, but his story is about King Hezekiah. Rather radical approach, but it's very interesting.
Fascinating. I didn't look at the Torah.com this week, so that's a
look at it. Yeah. Parashat Bo. It's this week's collection.
Yeah. Normally I get an email from them, but oh well, I know how to get there. So have a good day, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you again.
Thank you all for being here.
Chodesh Tov.
Yes, Chodesh Tov.
Mamash.